Good evening, everybody, or good morning, I should say, for most of you. My name is Niels van Oort. I'm a public transport researcher at the Technical University of Delft. And in this job, I'm very interested in bicycles, given the power of them to access and egress public transport. And that's also the topic of this workshop, of this breakout room, together with Roland Kager, Volker Piersma, and Bart Hofsink. We will give 3 pitches of about 10 minutes to share our ideas, findings, experience, lessons learned regarding the transit or the train and bicycle combination. What we like, what we dislike, what we've learned, etc. And I will kick off here again. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat, and we can hopefully have some time in between and afterwards to discuss them. It would be great to hear your experiences, also your questions and specific interest. This is a nice picture, I think, of the good old pre-COVID times in Delft, actually, where the transport minister of the Netherlands with the Euro commissioner was cycling with us from the university to the station to learn more about cycling and transit research in our university. And what I like very much and drives me in my research is this quote of her: "We need more bicycles, public transport, and brains." And hopefully from our public transport lab and department, we can actually provide some help there. And I think it's not only the Netherlands actually who need these 3 elements. I think every country in the world can use a bit of all 3 of them. And talking about our research, this is an infographic. You can have a look at it in more detail later, showing our findings so far. It's a very popular topic also amongst the students, I found. The younger generation is very interested in more sustainable mobility, it seems. And what we like to do in our research, as I said, is to investigate public transport in the wider sense from door to door. And we try to do fundamental scientific research, but thereby providing insights and knowledge to support design and policy, for instance, regarding the combination of bicycle and transit and bicycle and train. But also a very interesting topic is the emerge of shared bicycle systems, and a very interesting role towards public transport. Are they a competition or a complement to public transport? I think it's easy to guess what I think about it, but it's always good to put that into perspective. So if we talk about the multimodality and the bicycle and transit combination, this is what we are talking about. And from the public transport research perspective, actually, last decades, our focus wasn't on the first or the last mile, so to and from the station. It was mainly about the core business of public transport from stop to stop, whether it's by train, whether it's by metro, BRT, bus rapid transit, light rail transit, etc. But fortunately, more and more interest has grown regarding how to get to the station and also how to get from the station. Because in the end, most people do not live at a station or do not work at a station. I do have one colleague though, but that's an exception, I think. And what's interesting about this combination, from my perspective, I think, is that by having good first and last mile solutions, obviously the bicycle plays an important role there. Actually, it's also an opportunity to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of your public transport system. So it's a good way to not only improve the system from door to door, but actually also to improve the performance of public transport. Because if the public transport system is of a high level, and this is addressed here in orange by bus rapid transit, but as I said, it could also be metro, light rail, or heavy rail systems, of course. The catchment areas of these stations increase substantially. What we found out in this study in Amsterdam, people are willing to cycle approximately 2 times further to a high level quality stop than a local stop, you should say. And that, as you can see, if you compare the orange surface with the purple surface, that lead to approximately 4 times bigger catchment areas. And that's interesting regarding public transport design, which I will come back to in a minute. If you look at the benefits of public transport and bicycle as a combined mode, I tend to call it a good news show. If you look at the Netherlands, that's not completely true, because we do actually have some challenges regarding the parking of the bikes. There are quite a lot of them. Maybe you've been to our cities and you'll see. But in general, I think if you look at the benefits here, it's a good news show, because it's actually helpful for multiple societal challenges, issues like the climate, health, safety, congestion, etc. Also matches well with this 5E framework we developed. Did a lot of cost-benefit analysis, and we were actually surprised that there were so many of these wider benefits not taken into account in these cost-benefit analysis. Rather, it was a cycling project or a public transport project, actually. That's why we came up with this 5E model, showing the potential benefits of these projects, expressing the impacts on effective mobility, comfortable and fast from door to door. It's about efficient cities, especially the efficient space usage of this combination. It's about the economy, it's about the environment, obviously, and health, and last but not least, social inclusion and equity, which is more and more on the agendas of policymakers as well, I would say. So I mentioned that I would like to stress the importance of the combination also on the effectiveness and efficiency of public transport networks. That all has to do with this network design dilemma, which we acknowledge in public transport design. And it's actually about, it's a little bit black and white, but it helps to explain it, I think. It's all about this two types of networks we can design. We can go for the upper one, a dense network, but we also could go for more stretched one, like the lower one, which is more popular if you talk about high quality systems, as mentioned before. And both have their pros and their cons, but it's obvious that the lower one, more with the same amount of vehicles, higher frequencies could be offered, which is a very attractive factor for passengers. However, the lower one has less density of stops, so needs better access and egress facilities, and that's where the bicycle comes into play. There's a great video of the Dutch Ministry, the Knowledge Center of the Dutch Ministry, explaining this all. Here's the link. I'm not going to show it via this platform, but have a look at it later. And actually, to spoil it a bit, this animation is showing this dilemma, talking about dense versus frequent networks. And what they show in a case study is that multiple cases, what we see, and that's of course again a good news show, I would say, by changing networks into a more frequent network with good access and egress opportunities, ridership increases and actually cost decreases. And that's of course what I think as a policymaker and a funder, we would be very interested in. However, there's always an however. In the Dutch situation, I don't know the numbers for the US, but in our case, approximately 6% of the people is not able or willing to walk or cycle further to the stops, which I would say doesn't mean you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't design these kind of networks, but depending on our policy objectives, I would say this needs some attention in a more additional network design and opportunities to have everybody included in your transport system. It's nice to talk about this combination. I think we're doing quite well in the Netherlands. It also we can improve on multiple levels, but it's a combination of two modes, and that in general makes it more than twice complicated. And what we did in this research mentioned here is we found about 40 factors which you should take into account when planning for this bicycle transit combination. And they do not apply for all context and situations, of course, but it's a good checklist to have a look at when planning for this. It has to do with the culture to start with. I think Chris already mentioned that in the opening speech. It's not that we started with this yesterday. It might take some time to get your people involved like it is in the Netherlands, but don't wait to introduce it. It's about the bikeability. It's about the train journey quality, the rail system on the one hand, and also, of course, on the bicycle facilities, parking facilities, safes and direct routes to and from the stations, and also characteristics of the users. And last but not least, also competition of other modes is very important, not only to get to and from the station, but also to get from your house directly to your destination by car. Don't make it too easy, I would say, with that mode if you want to create a model shift. And then I go into the end of my presentation, showing this research and design cycle we use in our research. Until now, we have a lot of what we do here is we try to come up with insights and facts and figures to help to quantify these 5E factors, as I explained in previous slides. And we do this in this way. We mainly start with observing and analyzing, doing data analysis, etc. Then we try to understand what's happening. How does the combination work from a supply perspective? But more importantly, how do passengers behave? What are their preferences? And what do they like and what do they dislike? That's, I think, often overlooked aspect of designing in public transport especially. And then if we understand that to some extent, we can ask the question and answer the question, what if, to help you to find the optimal design or intervention you are looking for. And actually, that's what we are into these days, and also trying to increase the coming period. So if you want to join us with some interesting case study or questions, please do so, because from our lab, we like to be very much connected to the industry to come up with fundamental research results, which actually also has a good value for the industry. There's enough to read after this. If you like, there's a podcast. The fact sheet was also already shown. Chris will share all the slides so you can have a look at it later. And always welcome to answer your questions now or later after the session. And of course, we can also connect via whatever platform you prefer. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Niels. I'm happy to take over with another presentation. I'll try to share my screen. Niels, please, can you unshare your screen? Yeah. Let's see. Okay. I hope you can see my screen. It's a bit wobbly here.
Not yet, Roland, but maybe it comes. It says that you have started, so.
Yes, is it there now?
I think you can. Yes, there we go. Yeah, now it's in the.
Okay. Well, sorry for this delay.
Mode, so if you can put it on the full screen, Roland, and yes, there you go.
Okay. So hello, my name is Roland Kager, and happy to have some 10 minutes to talk with you about synergies between cycling, public transport, and cities. I am a mixture of a researcher and a consultant on all three themes, and I've done some research about these themes and what they have in common or how they reinforce each other. And I think that's important, and I will try to repeat as many as I can, this concept of synergy. You can invest in cycling, you can invest in public transport, you can invest in cities, increasing urban density and urban function. But if you align all three themes, we see there is important synergies. So you get 1 + 1 is 3 effects and even much more. In the Netherlands, we see a prime example of this, and maybe some will be discouraged when visiting here or hearing this kind of presentation or seeing these pictures from this is of another world. I think, first of all, we have been in the Netherlands 20 years ago at very other levels than we were now, but also where I have the opportunity to present in other countries, I see that in all places where urbanification is taking place, we see cycling is having a boom, or in many of those places, and vice versa with transit. And we can illustrate, if I show you this map of the Netherlands, here you see a part of the Netherlands, which is some 100 kilometers wide and 60 kilometers north to south, where the main cities are located. And I've just depicted here, using OpenStreetMaps and Google Translate feeder specification, how many trains you can reach from a station within a 20-minute cycling ride. And you see an immense variation. There are some places where you can reach 0 trains within 20 minutes of cycling. These are the dark blue areas, but other areas you can reach 200 trains per hour if you happen to live in the center of Amsterdam, and more than 100 in various other cities. And interestingly, even though I've just depicted this indicator, this is exactly where you see the red or the orange areas, where is the biggest and the most attractive cities, that combination in the Netherlands. On black, by the way, you saw the rail network. So this is all rail. It doesn't include light rail, metros, etc. And all black stops are a station. So why I think this is important, just browsing through some pictures. I think that is because when we work as either a researcher or a transport civil servant or a consultant, we can scan for chances where we can align these thematic areas. So if we can choose where cycling will be promoted or opportunities increased, we can scan where transit options are available or where urban densification is at a higher level, and vice versa. If we can pinpoint, select where urban densification could take place, we can look where transit opportunities are better or are in the process of being improved, and also cycling. And the best is when we get all three themes aligned, like we have done in the Netherlands. And then you can come to these kind of graphs, which are actual measurement areas for, we make a lot of these graphs for various areas, where on the left we see areas with high densities of jobs and inhabitants within a 2.5 kilometer radius. We see here that some 60% of all trips are shorter than 2.5 kilometers, and just 5% of those trips are made by car. Whereas if you go to low areas of low density and low mixture, we see only 40% of trips are shorter than 2.5 kilometers, and some 50% of those are made by car. And the reverse happens on longer journeys. There, the train takes over in this area, but it's an almost exclusive story for the car in low density area. And this is measured and documented for all areas in the Netherlands, and density and diversity of functions is the main decrement to this. On the combination of cycling and public transport, I often use this graph, which I've published also about. This is where you see transport modes classified on two axes. The first is the accessibility mode. So some transport modes typically connect only few places with each other, like the rail system, or a funicular system, or a ferry system. And on the right, you see modes that connect basically all systems, all destinations, like walking and cars. On the y-axis, we see the typical speed of various modes. And of course, you try to aim for transport systems that have both score high on the x-axis and on the y-axis, like cars. But if you combine cycling and rapid transit, you see if you can connect both, you can still reach that upper quadrant in the right. So that is the bicycle train combination. And that is actually half of the people in trains in the Netherlands, which is 1.2 million per day on pre-COVID times. 50% of them arrived by train or used, arrived by bike or used the bike when going from their destination station to the final destination. I've had the opportunity to write this PDF, Synergies from Improved Cycling Transit Integration, for the International Transport Forum, part of the OECD. And if you enter this phrase, you can download this presentation, and I will highlight some findings and some mechanisms that have been documented in this PDF, which underlie why cycling, public transport, and cities are have so much synergy with each other. The first is what Niels already mentioned, is simply you have area, because the speed of cycling is some 3 to 4 times higher than walking, and often also than public transport. It doesn't mean you have a 3 to 4 times higher catchment area, but a quadratic to it, so 9 to 16 times bigger area with the same time isochron. But because of that, if you have multiple stops in your urban area, typically on the scale of cycling, we see that many of these catchment areas overlap. So in the right picture, you see this big catchment area. If you live at one place where the house is located, you can have 3 and typically much more stops to choose from. Whereas if you just can walk, you typically are only located 1 or 2 catchment areas. And this means you can choose and optimize your journey, and not just which transport systems to use, but also what you pass by on the way, and what kind of activities or routes or transit services you select for your journey. So you get much more control and variation that you have control over for your combined bike transit journey. And that leads to what also Niels was talking about, that you get a magic hand. If people have access to bikes and the connection between cycling and transit is well integrated, that you see people selecting more often the higher hierarchies in the transit system, which is more often trains, metros, light rail, and less often buses. And this is the more the parts of the transit system that are more efficient to operate, not just for the users, but also for governments, and in the end also for users who don't arrive by station by bike. Because if this system is in place, it brings more places where the feeder system can connect to, so you get a better overall transport system for all, also for people not using bikes. And this in turn leads to an upper spiral that this place connects more often to urban places with other high densities. So you get the reverse of the urban sprawl phenomenon when you invest in cars and car infrastructure, that you sustain and let grow polycentric urban development. And this in turn leads to higher chances for transit systems and also for cycling, because there's more function on a more limited space. Another effect I will quickly browse through is that you see increased activity on longer distance from transit stops. And finally, another urban spatial development pattern that's more polycentric and more interconnected, which you see it to the right rather than to the left, of fewer places and less synergy. I conclude this presentation with 3 tips on what you can do in your work or your research or maybe activism to how to advance these kind of synergies. The first is to really look for opportunities to align or to reprioritize or to make the extra mile in the implementation of plans where all 3 themes are aligned. So areas where cycling, public transport, and increases in land use take place in the same area, to make the extra mile in those places, to get also the third one missing at the same level as the other 2 which are already in place. The second tip is if you invest in facilities like bike parking at stations or shared bikes systems or integration, it's better to focus efforts rather than distribute efforts. So not try to make free bike parking facilities at each transit stops, but maybe select 1 or 2 or 3 stations where you make very big bike parking, because you're aiming for rather growth. And this is, the bike is very footloose in where it goes to, but also very selective in which transit stops it connects to. We see this not just in the Netherlands, but also in cities like Paris, in Copenhagen, London, and all places where cycling is on the boom. It connects to transit stops at a higher level, or where transit does something like doing longer distance travels, or crossing river boundaries, or maybe altitude differences, and look for those places and makes cycling solutions at those places and not just at random transit stops. And the final advice is specify those synergies and reasons from those. One example I often hear is to invest in bike in transit. I think that's fine as a niche solution, but also be aware that this is a dead-end street and you can't reach high densities. And if this is what you aim for, I think be aware this only brings very limited synergies at rather high costs, and maybe quantifying them, what is an achievable density for what kind of investments can bring a better decision on how to pursue these kind of investments, and what is the conditions for connecting all these policy attentions on all 3 themes. So that's basically it. Thank you for your attention. I have a Twitter account which I've also shown. It's Bike Train Guru. Happy to connect there. or here is some deliverables on articles or other work for further reference. Thanks a lot, and I give the word to, I think Bart Hofsink will do the presentation. Is that right? The floor is yours. I'll stop sharing.
That's right. I'll share my screen. So good evening, everybody. My name is Bart Hofsink. I'm a project manager at ProRail. I'm having this series of webinars together with my colleague, former Volkert Piersma. I have to say former colleague because he retired at the end of last year, but he's still here in this webinar. Here's some facts and figures about Dutch people cycling. Some of them already were mentioned by former speakers. It all comes down to the fact that everybody in the Netherlands is cycling, students, parents with kids, rich, poor. Every child in the Netherlands learns how to ride a bike. Also my daughter, she's almost 3 years old. And she already managed to pedal, but she still has to work on her steering because that's not going too well. But we'll get to that. So in the Netherlands, we have this phenomenon we call the bike-train combination. In this combination, we do not take the bike on the train. So we need to build parking facilities at the train stations to create space for all those bikes. And that's where my company ProRail comes in. Because ProRail, on behalf of the national government, we manage the rail infrastructure in the Netherlands. It's about 4,500 miles of railway tracks, 400 railway stations, and which is unique in the world. It includes bicycle park facilities at all the 400 railway stations in the Netherlands. So ProRail does the maintenance, expansion, and replacement of all those facilities. And my job as a project manager is to expand bike parking facilities at all train stations. So to understand why this combination is so successful, it's important to know a bit about the history of car, train, and bike use in the Netherlands. Around 1950, we had 10 million inhabitants, and the car use is coming up after World War II, and at the expense of train use. And still, we had more bicycle use than car use. In 1970s, we had 13 million inhabitants. We had more and more cars, more and more highways, and there was a minimal growth in train use, and also low quality of bicycle parking facilities at railway stations. In 2000, we had almost 16 million inhabitants and more train and bicycle use, especially in the Randstad area, which was mentioned before. We had a lot of traffic jams. And also students can use public transport for free. It gave a massive boost to train use. And also in 2000, with the start of the program Bicycle Parking at Railway Stations. At that time, in 2000, we had 200 bicycle parking places at all railway stations. And 30% of all train users took the bicycle to go to the railway station. And now we are in 2021, but in 2020 we had over 70 million inhabitants. The train use grows each year with 2%, and 46% of all train users take the bicycle to go to the train, to the railway station. And we have 500 bicycle parking places at railway stations, and still more are needed. We have to go to 650,000 is the latest estimation. we are wondering, do you recognize similarities with the development of mobility in your area? So maybe we can discuss that in the discussion after this presentation. So I already mentioned the bicycle program. I already mentioned the program Bicycle Parking at Railway Station. It was commissioned by the Dutch national government, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. It started off in 1999, and at first it was 100% investment by the ministry, and later on there was co-financing by local and regional authorities. And its aim was to improve bicycle use by train travelers. And as I mentioned, over 500 places are realized, and we already spent about 500 million euros. One important thing is that the national government showed ownership to increase cycling and to increase cycling to the train station, because bicycle parking costs money, and we were lucky that the national government showed the ownership to finance those facilities. So what's important for success for cycling and public transport is you have to know what is important to the cyclist. But at first, you have to have a good functioning public transport system with a frequent timetable, sufficient seats in trains and buses, and pleasant railway or bus stations. Also, safe infrastructure for cyclists, good bicycle parking facilities at stations, knowledge about what is important to the traveler, and a good bike rental bike system for the last mile. It's important to know what is important to a cyclist. Maybe it's a bit like commercial business. You have to know the customer, and that is, what do cyclists like the best? They like the shortest and quickest route from A, let's say your home, to B, to the station. And when you're at B, the station, you want to park your bike as close to the station as possible. On some train stations, we managed to do that. You see here the platform, and on the right-hand side, right next to the platform, you see the bike parking facility. Then is the question, how do cyclists want to park? First of all, they want to do it quickly and free of charge. And secondly, safe, drive in a pleasant setting. In the Netherlands, only 10% of all cyclists choose to pay for guarded parking.
Wow.
Sorry?
Oh.
On the smaller stations in the Netherlands, on all smaller stations in the Netherlands, there's a free bike parking facility, which is very accessible. And on all stations in the Netherlands, they all look the same. They all have this look and feel as you see here. On all smaller stations, we have lockers for people who want to park their bike guarded. And again, all those lockers look the same on all stations, on all smaller stations in the Netherlands. On bigger stations, we created a guarded parking facility under existing stations. We also created new stations where we managed to build a guarded parking facility under the platform, right under the platform. So it is as close as it gets to the train. And almost 2 years ago, the largest bike parking facility in the world opened in the city of Utrecht. It's a facility for 12,500 bikes. With such big facilities, it's not always easy to find an available spot. So that's why we introduced a detection and address system. It works on two sides. The cyclist easily can find an available parking place, and the facility manager can see how long bikes are parked. That's important to know because in most guarded facilities, there is a maximum of days a bike can be parked. And as I mentioned before, only 10% of the Dutch people want to pay for parking their bike. In almost all guarded parking facilities, you had to pay for parking a bike. And that was mainly the reason why guarded parking facilities were not used a lot. So that's why we introduced a new parking regime. And that's every first 24 hours, it's free of charge. Since then, also the guarded parking facilities are used a lot. And for us in this program, a very important conclusion is that a good range of bicycle parking facilities creates extra use by travelers. So that's the main success of the program we had over the last 20 years. Thank you for your attention. You have more information. If you want more information, contact us at the email addresses. Also very mentionable is that Volkert, my colleague, wrote a book together with another colleague of mine called Bicycle Parking at Train Station. And every topic has an English summary in it. So it's very readable. Thank you a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Bart. And indeed, I just received a book, compliments to the authors. And there is another one with Ronald. It's a Dutch book, but very helpful are these English summaries. And maybe at some point we can convince the authors to make a full English edition. But let's see. Volker just retired, so let's not stress.
Let's give him a bit of a rest.
Yes, indeed. I think that's well deserved. And meanwhile, there were some questions for you, Bart or Volker, if you want, via the chat. Can you see them, or shall I read them for you? What's more convenient? Especially about.
I can see them. I can see.
Okay,
them.
maybe you can repeat the question and briefly, and then go into
Yep.
it. We have 10 minutes left for questions and discussions. Please do not hesitate to have more questions in the chat.
Could you talk about bicycle valet or guarded parking services at train stations? Who uses them, and why do you include that service at train stations? Why do we have guarded parking? We have guarded parking for people who want to park, who have an expensive bike and want to park it guarded. So there is a minimal chance of it gets stolen. And also we have more and more guarded parking facilities because bigger cities in the Netherlands do not want to have any bikes anymore in the public area. They want to put it in a building or in a facility under the ground. And in such facilities, it's better to have a facility manager for safety in those facilities. And that's mainly, I think, the reason why those facilities are guarded, because most Dutch people do not really care about their bike. It's not it's not a thing that needs to be very beautiful or anything. Yes.
I think that's especially for the people who daily use a bike to go to the station, because I think every Dutchman has one or two or more bicycles, and the bike they use daily to go to the station is the oldest one, and it's cost maybe 50 euros or so. So it's not so very valuable.
I think there might be a new trend though going on with especially the e-bikes, which are more expensive.
Yeah.
And also because I mentioned these 40 factors of the combination, and especially hilliness was for a long time was a reason not to look at cycling. We don't have hills in the Netherlands, by the way, so that's easy for us. But I think e-bike is a big step there. And then I think guarded bicycle parking could be very relevant. So what are questions to you about? Oh, sorry.
Yes, and maybe if I can add that the average distance that people cycle in the Netherlands to or from station is just under 3 kilometers. But interestingly enough, that's very skewed to the right. So we also see many people cycling 10 kilometers to stations, or not many, but we see shares cycling that. And then, of course, you see higher e-bike usage. And then there's higher demands for the storage facility. And also many people use park a second, what we call a second bike, which could also be a third or a fourth bike, at a destination station. So they travel to that station and pick it up there and only use it when they are in the destination cities. And there you see another mixture. Often those are cheaper bikes because they are there all day long for a long time. So we have many how do you say, thematic themes with bike parking at stations.
Yes, thanks, Roland. Some other questions to Bart and Volkert, I think, regarding the parking. Can you?
Yes, does guarded mean staffed or secured in lockers? On the smaller station, we have lockers. And on the bigger station, we have staffed facilities, but also non-staffed guarded facilities. Next question: do these lockers accommodate cargo bikes? Most cargo bikes, they accommodate most cargo bikes, but in Holland we have this unique thing in the world that we have very let's say baskets, very big baskets on the steering wheel. And they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's also a bit of a problem in our facilities because those bikes don't fit in the racks anymore. So it could well be that they also don't fit in the lockers anymore.
So a new question about staffed facilities for repair and so. And I think we can say that most of the staffed bicycle parking facilities, you can buy little things, but also it's possible to repair the bicycle, flat tires and so. And you bring it in the morning and you have it repaired back in the afternoon or in the evening. So that's also a service facility at most staffed bicycle parking facilities.
For my personal experiences, that's a very much appreciated service. If you have a flat tire along the way to the station, you can leave it there, and after the end of the day, it's fixed, and you can go back to home again. There was also a question about the funding, but and maybe you can say a little bit that not an important factor, I would say.
No, it's not. It's a very important factor. Nowadays, 40% of the funding needed is of the money needed is funded by the national government, and 60% is funded by has to be funded by the local government. That's that's it. It used to be 100% national government.
Maybe to add on that question, is it to explain? Is it hard to get this funding? Is it easy to get all this funding because you build all these cathedrals almost that comes with a price? How easy or hard is such a project to get the funding from?
It depends on the priority in the city. Some cities really find it a big problem accommodating all those bikes, and they want to have a good solution for it, and also ProRail wants a good solution for it, and then it's quite easy to get the fund together to build the facility, but sometimes there's not so much priority at a local government, and then it can take years before you can start a project.
Okay, thanks.
does the 24-hour free of charge rule for bike parking resets every time a biker enters and exits the facility? That answer is yes. Are there any more questions?
But maybe it's good to mention also that the money is what is necessary for bicycle parking is divided in several parts, because you have it's always starts with investments, and that's one time you have to invest to build a new or a bigger bicycle parking. But later on, when it's existing, you also have to remain, and every year it costs money to keep it in good shape. So that's the second part, and the third part is the money it costs to operate the bicycle parking. So to pay the staff who is working there every day. So that it's three important parts. And the first and the second, so the investments and the remaining of the that part the national government is funding. The operation part is by the local government and the railway company together.
Clear. Time is ticking, I see here, because in 27 seconds we will magically move to the plenary session. So if there's an urgent question left, unmute yourself or be silenced forever. I wanted to continue. Always happy to continue discussing later. I think all email addresses, etc., are shared. So then I would like to thank you and see you soon.